It was Christmas Eve night. We always hosted Christmas Eve at our house when I was a kid. My grandparents, uncles, and my cousins would always come. This year I must have been like 12. My mom was making duck as she always did. On Christmas Eve I was helping her cook and prepare this year because my dad actually had a really bad cold and was trying to not touch anything or stay too close to anyone. Our family slowly started showing up one by one. My uncle Joe first, with my cousins Chris and Valerie. They were the closest in age to me, so I've always been closest with them out of all my cousins. As soon as they got there I got distracted from helping out my mom, because Chris brought over a video game for my PlayStation that I'd been wanting to play Driver 2. We ran upstairs to my room to put the disc in and play, and Valerie came just to watch, but within a few minutes my mom called my name up the stairs, angrily ruining the fun. I was hoping she'd just let me play, but she was already stressed from the amount of work that cooking and preparing for a big family is, so we had to resume playing the game later. We left it on pause and all three of us went back downstairs. Most family had arrived already. I was juggling saying hi to everybody while helping set up the table and stuff. Within half an hour the whole family was there and dinner was almost ready. The table was already set and half the family was already at the dinner table, including myself. Then I remember my mom yelling underscore. She yelled for me to run to the basement to grab the stuffing, which she forgot to make. Our house didn't have an actual pantry closet, so my mom used the back side of the bar in the basement as a pantry. I went down to the basement to fetch the stuffing. I was behind the bar looking for the damn stuff when I noticed a blanket covering something in the corner next to the two sofas. At first glance I assumed it was a person, one of my cousins, hiding, trying to scare me. As I walked a little closer I could confirm it was a person based on the shape of what was underneath the blanket. I could see the person's head. I stood there, waiting to see if they'd react to my not making noise. I was wondering how he or she would know when to jump out to scare me if they couldn't see me under that blanket. Suddenly the lights to the basement turned off and I heard the basement door slam shut. I yelled screw you to whoever it was, Valerie or Chris, went for my neck as soon as they felt where it was. In the dark for a few seconds I thought it was Chris roughhousing me and I was screaming at him to stop, but this felt like the grip of a grown man. I started to scream for my life with whatever air was able to escape my lungs. The door to the basement opened and the light turned on, revealing an old, dirty, disheveled looking man. He let me go and ran to the basement door, which led to the backyard, not the basement door that led to the upstairs. Half my family came rushing down. I was crying and screaming. He went that way, pointing at the open backyard basement door. Two of my uncles ran outside to try to find him, while my mom and aunts came to my side to try to comfort me. As I was crying, I was literally shook. My whole body was shaking and I felt ill. My mother called the police to report this. My uncles were out in the streets for like 20 minutes, looking from house to house for the man. It made no sense, because it didn't look like he would have been able to make it too far, which makes me think he was hiding somewhere in the backyard at our neighbor's yard. The officer said it sounded like some homeless squatter hiding from the cold, and that they'd gotten a number of these calls that month. That did make things sound any better. After that allegedly homeless man had his hand around my neck, my cousins were trying to pull a prank on me, hence why they turned the light off and shut the door originally, but this was obviously not part of their plan, so my family learned a valuable lesson at my horrifying expense. Always keep every single entrance to your house locked at all times. The house. It was Christmas Eve. Sydney was spending the weekend with us for Christmas. I don't think she had much family herself. We watched the movie Elf as a family, my brother, sister, dad, and Sydney. After the movie ended, my dad and Sydney went to bed. I stayed up with my brother a little later to watch the Polar Express. Around the time the movie ended, Sydney came downstairs to tell us that it's maybe time to go to sleep. I was young, but I was old enough to be suspicious about Santa Claus by now, and I had a feeling it was always my dad putting the gifts under the tree. I went to my room to play video games for a few hours. I snuck out of my room around 12 o'clock to see if the presents were under the tree. Yet my bedroom was the only bedroom on the den level, so every other bedroom was upstairs. The living room and tree were on the first level, a half flight of stairs above my bedroom. I snuck out of my room and tiptoed up the stairs. I peered into the living room, which was lit up by the Christmas tree. There were presents under there, and there was Sydney under the tree. At first I thought she was placing the gifts there, and I thought I was right all along that Santa wasn't real. But I quickly realized she wasn't placing the gifts there. She was shaking them, like trying to figure out what's inside of the boxes. She picked up one gift, which was in a gift bag, started digging through it, and pulled out something that looked like it was for my sister, like makeup. She analyzed it and put it back in the bag. I didn't know what she was doing, but I kept watching. I saw her walk to the kitchen and go to the ledge where my dad keeps his wallet. What I saw next I couldn't believe. She went through my dad's wallet and took out a few bills and put it in the pocket of her pajama pants. I kept watching as she went into the cabinet above the ledge, the medicine cabinet. She took out what looked to be one of my dad's prescription medication bottles. She started analyzing it. She opened it, sniffed it, and then looked to her left, right at me. It was as if she was about to do something very bad and was checking that the coast was clear first, and she saw me right away. Her eyes widened and she put the bottle back in the cabinet. I hurried down the stairs back to my room and crawled into bed with my little kid mind, thinking I somehow could still pretend to be asleep. Seconds later the door creaked open and then shut. I didn't look, but I didn't know if she entered the room or not. A few minutes passed and I finally felt it was safe to check if she was gone. I looked up and sitting was standing right over my bed. I guessed and almost screamed. She looked down at me. All I could see was the silhouette of her figure, making the sight of her even creepier. She said she saw me watching her and said in this angry whisper that she wasn't doing anything wrong. She just wanted to make sure my dad was taking his medication. I replied okay, and she said Merry Christmas and left the room. The next day after we opened gifts, my dad came into the living room angrily and said who took $60 out of my wallet. I looked at Sydney right away, who glanced back at me as if she knew that I knew. At that moment I didn't tell my dad what I saw, but later that day, when my dad was still angry at my siblings and I thinking one of us did it, I told him the truth of what I saw. My dad didn't believe me at first, but when I told him that she was going through his medication too, he started to believe me, because why would I lie about that? Later that night this created for a rather loud conversation between the two of them, but shockingly my dad didn't ask Sydney to leave. She didn't admit to stealing his money, and I think my dad simply didn't know what to do that night. I had my bedroom door locked, which my dad always told us to never do, but I just felt safer with it locked that night, and thank God I did lock it, because around the same time as the night before I heard the doorknobs in my bedroom door jiggle a few times. It was undoubtedly her, which the next day I confirmed when I asked my dad if it was him, and he said no. After she left that night I begged and pleaded my dad to not have her over anymore because she scared me and it looked like she was gonna do something to his medication. I'm grateful my dad listened to me because he stopped seeing Sydney shortly after that. I wonder what she was actually going to do to his medication if she didn't notice me watching her.